The best part about any Super Smash Bros. Game are the character reveals, and with the bigger push for third-party IPs such as Kingdom Hearts, Banjo-Kazooie, Minecraft and more, the potential for new characters and new series, both Nintendo first-party and third-party, is really great. So let's go through 10 characters that I'd like to see in the next Super Smash Bros. Game that will most likely come out on Nintendo's next home console.
Lockhart QT.
So let's get started off with Crash Bandicoot. I think Crash was one of the most requested characters of Smash Ultimate, and now that Crash is owned by Activision Blizzard, he has a bigger chance since he's not solely owned by PlayStation and Sony. Crash's moveset could involve lots of jumping, spinning, Wumpa Fruit, he could have his Wumpa like Fruit Bazooka, and powers found in the OG trilogy, as well as some of the mask powers perhaps in Crash 4. The stage could even be Sanity Beach, modelling off the version seen in the original Crash Bandicoot and Crash Bandicoot 4. Next up, of course, is Spyro the Dragon. Like Crash, former Sony and now Activision Blizzard. The chances hurting Crash and Spyro are essentially a sexual harassment bullying lawsuit Activision Blizzard are currently involved with, and the fact that Microsoft are currently in a legal battle to own Activision Blizzard but are being essentially stopped by the lawsuit. Spyro's moveset, however, if he comes to Super Smash Bros., could involve fire breathing, gliding, tail attacks, claw attacks, and the use of sparks, the dragonfly maybe for projectiles. And the stage could even be the main hub world from the original game, Artisans, with maybe dragon statues and other collectibles such as gems hidden in the background. Viola is next up from Bayonetta 3. She could wield her katana and use attacks using her demon cat Cheshire from Bayonetta 3, but this could also be her final smash. She could also use her grappling hook and witch time just like Bayonetta. The stage to accompany Viola could be the Gates of Hell, which is the bar seen in the Bayonetta series. It essentially acts as a main hub where characters can go and buy new items, check collectibles, and hang out with Rodon. Rodon is of course already an assist trophy in Smash Bros, so they'd have to do something like the Spirit Track stage, where if Toon Link is on the stage, he's not driving the train. For example, if Rodon is an assist trophy and selected, he won't appear in the bar. Next up, we have one of the main protagonists from Xenoblade Chronicles 3, being a Nintendo first-party IP and the first on this list. But instead of having Noah, as although he is essentially the main character, the main protagonist, I feel as though his moveset would be way too similar to Shulk and Rex if Rex ever does come in the future. So instead, I've gone for Mio. She can use attacks using her dual Moonblades, whilst also using them as projectiles to throw. They could also incorporate the fact that her class in the game is meant to essentially gain aggro from enemies and gain their attention. Also, you have the class swapping ability in Xenoblade Chronicles 3, so they could incorporate that in some terms really. In terms of a stage though, I'd have to go for The City, which although in its name is very bland and boring, this is essentially a big prominent city on the Mechon's sword that's seen throughout Ionis, and it's essentially one of the main areas that you keep coming back to in Xenoblade Chronicles 3, so I feel like that would be a good stage to have. Either that or they do the Sword of the Mechonis. Next up is Dante from Devil May Cry. For his appearance, I'd like to have 4 different costumes based on his appearances in Devil May Cry 5, 3, the original, and 4. Or basically having one where it's the alternate, the Ninja Theory DMC, but again that wasn't very popular, plus it was in PlayStation All-Stars, so I don't think they'll go for that. Personally, I'd just like 1, 3, 4 and 5. But we could also have a alternate coloured palette for each one. In terms of moveset, Dante would be a high combo character using his various weapons and guns from the games, and I'd even like to add a mechanic to where Dante gets buffs based upon his ranking system. Basically in Devil May Cry, the better combos you do for battles, you get a ranking system going all the way from, I think it's D, all the way through to triple S. So I'd like them to incorporate this somehow. This would appear next to the player HUD information, where you've got the player name, icon and damage. In terms of stage, I've gone for Temen Gru. I'm sorry if I've pronounced that horrifically wrong. I haven't played DMC3 in a very long time. This is essentially where Dante's final fight with Virgil takes place, and speaking of which, Virgil would also make for an excellent character or assist trophy. Next up is Commander Shepard from the Mass Effect series. Of course, you'd have both female and male. I think that Shepard could fit in quite well with melee attacks and using the Omni tool. You could also use tech powers using both defense and attack drones, and even some biotic powers such as warp and some others to basically warp players' gravity, and you can also, I guess, use them as projectiles. It's a bit weird, but essentially you could fire a warp at an enemy and then they just sort of go floating off until the next hit. In terms of stage, I'd like to have a massive Reaper fight on Rannoch from Mass Effect 3. This would essentially take place on the planet itself, maybe with a couple of floating platforms, with a massive Reaper destroying everything in the background. And maybe even a cameo from the Normandy maybe flying up as well. Next up, weirdly, I know a lot of people are going to look at this and really dislike this, but at the end of the day, Smash Bros is about a collection of gaming history. Next up is Jonesy from Fortnite, but instead of just having Jonesy, I thought about having essentially the Looper, which is the main playable character and the main skins that you actually play as in Fortnite, and essentially having just 8 alternate Fortnite skins, similarly to how Inkling works, where you have the different skins. In terms of moveset, they'd use their pickaxe, different guns, and variety of different pickups that you can get in Fortnite, and they could somehow maybe incorporate building structures, or if it's too much for sort of the game to handle, if it's too game breaking essentially, you could add smaller walls or barriers. In terms of stage, I think it has to be Tilted Towers, as it's a prominent part of the Fortnite map, and it's appeared in all iterations of the different seasons of Fortnite. Ezio from Assassin's Creed is up next, and although we did get an Altair costume in Smash Bros Ultimate, which is really nice, I'd really like Ezio to have his own character slot. His moveset could use the Leap of Faith, Hidden Blades, and other weapons such as swords and basically any weapon that is used in Assassin's Creed 2 all the way through to Revelations. He could also have costumes based on those games, so one for 2, one for Revelations, one for Brotherhood, and maybe like an alternate, his like black costume or something like that. In terms of stage, I think it would have to be the Domenico Aldatore Villa from Assassin's Creed 2, as its location is very specific to Ezio and very specific to his family, plus if memory serves right, it's obviously a very prominent location in his main game being Assassin's Creed 2, but it also does appear in Brotherhood as well, so I think the villa would be a really good essentially stage to have because it is based off a real life location. Next up is a prominent sort of fan favourite, another one that didn't really make it into Ultimate sadly, I think I know why, but hey ho, is Scorpion from Mortal Kombat. And like I said, the only thing that could stop Scorpion from getting in, and the same for like if they wanted to add Sub-Zero for example, is the age rating and the gore factor that Mortal Kombat would essentially bring with it. He'd have to be incredibly toned down to fit with Smash Bros. He'd fight using punches, kicks, and the iconic, obviously, get over here for maybe a grab or a projectile move. The stage would be one of the main fighting stages from the original games, with maybe including the Toasty Easter egg, for example, in the background, and maybe different Easter eggs where you've got some other Mortal Kombat characters hanging out in the background, kind of like the Fatal Fury stage from King of Fighters, and how they did that. And how they, in Smash Ultimate, they had loads of, for example, in the Persona stage, you had all the characters in the background cheering you on. So they could do that with Mortal Kombat characters. Lastly, we have Meowscarada from Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, which is Sprigagito's last evolution. The character would be the first Grass Starter evolution as its own singular character, and would use essentially magic tricks like Magical Leaf. They could use like Grass Knot, Solar Beam, they could use a variety of different grass moves from the Pokemon series really, and then you've also got dark type moves such as Bite and etc, Crunch maybe. But for the stage, I'd also like to choose the Academy from Scarlet and Violet. I'm thinking because obviously it's either Naranja Academy or Yuva Academy depending on which game you have. The stage could essentially just change depending on, say for example, the first time you pick it it's Naranja, and then the second time it's Yuva, and it just sort of alternates between the two, and would essentially be outside the main building of the school. And in the background we could also see some characters such as Nimona and other like gym leaders and trainers that you meet in Scarlet and Violet, and you could also have some Paldean Pokemon hanging around in the background. Well, that's 10 characters I'd like to see in the next Super Smash Bros. Game. Who would you like to see? Please tell me in the comments. Thank you so much for watching, and for more Mass Effect, Final Fantasy and Nintendo content, stay subscribed to the channel. Goodbye everyone, and thank you so much for watching.